For much of World War II, Britain's Royal Navy was mesmerized by a single German warship, the mighty battleship Tirpitz. Her 8 15-inch guns were powerful enough to sink any Allied warship. She spent most of the war lurking in fjords in northern Norway. From here, the Tirpitz threatened Allied convoys bound for Russia. These convoys carried munitions from the Western Allies through the Arctic Ocean to northern Soviet ports. This material was vital to sustaining Russia's war effort. The Royal Navy feared the Tirpitz would slip out and attack the Russian-bound convoys. This fear led to one of Britain's greatest blunders of the war. Mistakenly believing that the Tirpitz was heading for Convoy PQ17, the Admiralty ordered the convoy's escort to leave and allow it to make its own way to Russia. The result was that most of the merchant ships in the convoy fell victim to German air and submarine attacks. For the Germans, it was the war's greatest victory over an Allied convoy. For the Allies, it was a tragic waste of human life and war materials due to a grave blunder. In the weeks after the invasion of the Soviet Union in June 1941, it seemed nothing could stop the Germans. Russia suffered one crushing defeat after another. Britain welcomed Russia in the fight against the Axis powers, but could offer Stalin no direct help. Even so, the two countries signed a mutual assistance pact in July 1941. Both pledged not to make a separate peace with Nazi Germany. But the Soviet Union needed more than a piece of paper to continue resisting the German onslaught. Churchill therefore sent a convoy carrying planes and rubber to the northern Soviet ports of Archangel and Murmansk. At the same time, the United States declared that the Soviet Union was now entitled to American munitions under its Lend-Lease program. 3 supply routes were set up. One was by air from Alaska to Siberia. Another was a land route from the Iraqi port of Basra through Iran. The most hazardous of the 3 routes, and the one that carried the most war material, was by sea, via the northern Soviet ports of Archangel and Murmansk. The summer route passed close to Greenland, but in winter, ice forced convoys to sail close to German-occupied Norway. The first of the regular Russian convoys sailed at the end of September 1941. It was designated PQ-1 and consisted of 10 merchant vessels that arrived at Archangel without loss. At the same time, Averell Harriman from the United States and Lord Beaverbrook from Britain flew to Moscow to discuss Soviet munitions needs. Churchill told Stalin he would send a convoy every 10 days. This proved impossible. The Arctic winter arrived, and conditions worsened for those on board the Russian convoys. The escorting warships suffered severely from the weather and often needed extensive repairs. The United States had not joined the war yet, so the British did not have enough vessels to provide immediate replacements. Convoys were delayed. By the end of 1941, only 7 convoys had been sent to Russia, but they all got through without loss. The Germans, however, had been alerted. They began to reinforce Norway with U-boats and destroyers. Then, in January 1942, the battleship Tirpitz was sent to Norway. She was followed by the German heavy cruisers von Scheer and Prinz Eugen. The latter was torpedoed en route. The British were soon aware of the presence of the Tirpitz. They also realized it presented a threat to the Russian convoys. Churchill declared the Tirpitz the most important naval vessel in the situation today. Attempts to destroy the battleship by air were unsuccessful. In March 1942, the Tirpitz launched her first attack on an Arctic convoy, PQ-12, which had been pinpointed by German reconnaissance aircraft. But bad weather kept her from zeroing in on the convoy. She therefore returned to port. Here she was attacked by British carrier aircraft. They too failed to hit her. Hitler's reaction was to send more aircraft to Norway. The growth of German naval and air strength in Norway meant that the chances of the convoys reaching Russia unscathed were diminishing. As spring approached in 1942, the Arctic was bathed in perpetual daylight. The Russian convoys lost their cover of darkness. This, and the growing strength of the German forces in Norway, resulted in more damage to the British ships. Even worse, slow-melting ice forced convoys to stick close to the Norwegian coast. And the Soviet Union was once more under pressure. The Germans had launched a major offensive in southern Russia designed to overrun the Caucasus and its vital oil fields. Churchill was adamant that the Russian convoys continue. Convoy PQ17 sailed the same night Churchill made this announcement. It lost 6 ships before reaching Murmansk. Next to sail was PQ17. Like the previous convoys, its ships gathered near Iceland. In all, it contained 35 merchant vessels, 22 American, 8 British, 2 Russian, 2 Panamanian, and 1 Dutch. The convoy's cargo included nearly 300 aircraft, 600 tanks, 3,000 trucks and trailers. To date, it was by far the largest of the convoys bound for Russia. PQ-17's escort was 6 destroyers and a number of smaller warships. But aware of the threat in Norway, the British Admiralty arranged for forces to sail ahead of the convoy. This included the British cruiser London, the American cruiser Wichita, and British cruiser Norfolk. A second American cruiser, Tuscaloosa, and 3 U.S. destroyers. To counter the specific threat of the Tirpitz, part of the British home fleet also went to sea. the battleships HMS Duke of York and USS Washington were to steam 200 miles behind the convoy and be prepared to draw the Tirpitz away and attack her. They were accompanied by the aircraft carrier HMS Victorious, 2 cruisers, and 14 destroyers. On June 27, 1942, Convoy PQ17 set sail from Iceland. Hollywood star Douglas Fairbanks Jr. was serving on the cruiser Wichita. He described the merchantman, waddling out to sea like so many dirty ducks. Everyone who was watching paid a silent tribute and offered some half-thought prayer. But prayers were not enough. As the convoy headed north toward the midnight sun of the Arctic, U-boats were on patrol. One of these spotted the merchant ships as they reached open water. Shadowed by the U-boats, the convoy now ran into heavy ice, which damaged a number of the ships. One was forced to return to Iceland. Another ran aground. 33 merchantmen remained to sail on to Russia. On July 1st, a German reconnaissance aircraft spotted the convoy. Attacks from the air and by U-boats could now be expected as the convoy continued to steam north. And there was the ever-present fear that the mighty Tirpitz might suddenly appear on the horizon. Fog came to the rescue of Russian convoy PQ17, protecting it from German attack for a day. But on July 2nd, 1942, the fog lifted. The inevitable German reconnaissance plane appeared over the convoy. Early that evening, the convoy was attacked by torpedo aircraft. Anti-aircraft fire shot down 2 planes and stopped the attack. The next day, the convoy again avoided attack. But on July 4th, the picture began to change. U-boats moved in and sank 2 Liberty ships. The escorts managed to ward them off, and convoy PQ17 sailed on. But back in London, the First Sea Lord, Admiral Sir Dudley Pound, exhausted by the 3 years of war as head of the Royal Navy, received disturbing news. It came from Norwegian agents monitoring the Tirpitz. The battleship had reportedly weighed anchor the previous day, the 3rd of July. To Pound, this could only mean one thing. Tirpitz and her escorts were intending to intercept convoy PQ17. In reality, the Tirpitz was merely moving to the extreme north of Norway. Pound's misinterpretation would be fatal for the convoy. The battleship force behind the convoy was the one part of the escort that could take on Tirpitz. But Admiral Pound realized that he had positioned it too far away to keep the German battleship from attacking both the convoy and the cruisers to its north. Deeply worried, he called a hasty meeting to decide what action should be taken. All but one staff member said the convoy must stay together, but Pound had other ideas. He wanted the convoy to scatter. Late that night, a series of radio messages was transmitted by the Admiralty. 2111 hours, most immediate and secret. Cruiser forced to withdraw westward at high speed. 2123 hours, immediate. Owing to threat of surface ships, Convoy is to disperse and proceed to Russian ports. 2136 hours, most immediate. Convoy is to scatter. The convoy commodore and the commander of the close escort were aghast, but there was nothing they could do. The destroyers said farewell and left the ships of PQ17 on their own to face the horrors ahead. The escort commander's last signal to the convoy read, "Sorry to leave you like this. Good luck. Looks like a bloody business." Douglas Fairbanks Jr. on board the Wichita said, "It was such a terrible feeling to be running away from the convoy at twice the speed of theirs and to leave them to the mercy of the enemy." Admiral Pound believed that the merchant ships had a better chance of reaching Russia individually. If they remained together, they gave the Germans a huge target. But he failed to appreciate that the Arctic ice severely limited their ability to maneuver. During the next 2 days, the enormity of this blunder would become clear. On the following day, July 5th, German U-boats and the Luftwaffe moved in for the kill. By the end of the day, 12 convoy ships were sent to their graves. 2 more merchant ships sank the next day, and 4 more on July 7th. During the next few days, another 4 merchant vessels were lost. Eventually, only 11 of the 35 ships that had left Iceland made it to Russia. 3 of these were sunk on the return voyage. PQ17 was a disaster and the biggest German victory against an Allied convoy. The reverberations were quickly felt. Churchill condemned the decision to abandon the convoy and decreed this would never happen again. U.S. Navy Commander-in-Chief Admiral Ernest King was so angry he did not want U.S. and British warships to operate together in the North Atlantic. The Russians accused the Western Allies of lying about the losses suffered by PQ-17. They objected strongly when the next convoy was delayed until autumn. No less than 53 warships were deployed to protect PQ-18. Even so, the Germans still managed to sink 13 ships in that convoy. Russian convoys were now suspended until the end of 1942. After that, they continued until almost the war's end, assisted by stronger escorts and improved tactics. Never again would they suffer like PQ-17. Admiral Pound, who initiated the blunders that destroyed Convoy PQ17, died of a brain tumor in October 1943. As for the Tirpitz, which generated such fear among the British and triggered the blunders, she never did engage Allied warships in the northern seas. She was subjected to numerous air attacks. Lancaster bombers eventually sank her in November 1944 with the loss of 1,200 crewmen. Those who sailed in Convoy PQ-17 were ultimately revenged.